Welcome to Session 2 in Stream 3, Problem Solving, Success Stories, and Lessons Learned. Our speakers today are Brooklyn Mann and Racheal Rochon, who will be speaking about their journey to indigenize a trauma-informed agency. If you are in the wrong session, please navigate to the session you're looking for through the menu on the left of your screen. Click the Sessions button and then click on the session you would like to attend. Brooklyn was born and raised in Cowichan Valley and is now raising her 2 young girls here with her husband and their 3 dogs. Passionate about having a positive impact on others and in our community, Brooklyn began her career in the credit union system while taking her degree in criminology. Through her long and successful career in finance, her passion for values-based leadership emerged as she was honored to have many amazing educational and career opportunities awarded to her along the journey. In 2016, Brooklyn expanded her desire to be of service and joined the CWAV Society as a volunteer board member, eventually taking on the role of vice chair and then finally chair of the board. Her commitment to helping underserved and underrepresented populations became such a strong priority that when the opportunity arose, Brooklyn decided to transition from her career in the financial sector to pursue her passion and accept the role of program and HR director at Cowichan Women Against Violence Society. With over 70 staff and 14 programs, the Society offers a variety of services to the community and is excited to lead the way in many new initiatives and designs, some of which you'll hear about today. Racheal grew up in Manitoba and moved to Vancouver Island in 2013, where she currently lives with her husband and 3 daughters. With over a decade of experience across multiple fields, including social service sector, including addiction work, facilitation, program planning, and counseling, Racheal developed a passion for helping others through client-centered care, which ultimately encouraged her desire to expand her knowledge of trauma-informed practices. In January of 2021, Racheal began her career with Cowichan Women Against Violence Society as a crisis counselor. This opportunity nurtured her dedication in bringing impactful change to the community, where she eventually took on the role of program supervisor at Somanos Transition House in Cowichan Valley. She is excited to be part of the CWAVS team working to remove barriers and create positive change in the community. Welcome, Brooklyn and Racheal.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation to be here. We're very excited to get to share a little bit about our journey and the successes, the stumbles, the learnings we've had along the way to indigenizing our trauma-informed agency here. We do just want to recognize that we are presenting from the unceded territories of the Cowichan Valley. And with that, we do always like to follow up our land acknowledgements with our commitment to action. And so we're hoping that our presentation here today speaks to some of the absolute dedication we have to creating action through our acknowledgements of the unceded territories.
Thank you. I'm very grateful to be here and to be able to share our journey with everybody. So thank you.
With that, we will just turn off our video so we can focus on the presentation we have prepared for everyone today and pay attention to our slides here for you. So we would like to start, sorry, there we go, by talking a little bit about the agency. About 45 years ago, the Cowichan Valley, it was experiencing abnormally high rates of violence against women. And 4 founding mothers sat around a table acknowledging this need and figuring out what they could do to be of service to support these women that really had nowhere to go, especially during that period of time. And so they started our agency with a crisis line sitting around a kitchen table, and eventually helping this agency grow and purchase a transition house and become what it is today, where we now have over 70 female identifying staff with 14 plus programs that we're able to offer and create those wraparound services with. What's really important and what has fed through the whole 45 years and really continued to push our work is working from a feminist and trauma-informed lens, because we are so passionate about still ensuring that we're supporting the women and children that are experiencing violence, but also recognizing the intersectionality that often occurs within those sections of population and our dedication to underrepresented and oppressed individuals within society. So we do have programs now that also support males, males that are wanting to engage in different types of learning on how to potentially communicate without violence, males that may be experiencing poverty, which we know is one of the identifiers that can often enhance likelihood of violence, and really just making sure that our services are as inclusive as possible. As we continue to expand, we keep looking at the different gaps within our communities, and that really helps guide us, particularly with our board of directors, on where we need to continue our growth within the agency, so that when we say wraparound, we truly are creating a society that people can go to and really have access to everything they might need.
And with that, I will tell you a little bit more about Somnos Transition House. So women can reach out to Somnos Transition House by calling our crisis line. It's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They can also text or email, and we will respond as soon as we get those messages coming in. Somnos means resting place in the Halkomenam language. And that's exactly what we strive to be. We are a 24/7 staffed, confidential, family-style home. We have 6 bedrooms, 12 beds, and offer a communal living space, so a shared kitchen, a shared living space, and shared bathrooms. We are a welcoming space for women with or without children who are escaping violence or at risk of violence, and they are welcome to stay with us for up to 30 days. Some do not actually stay the 30 days and they move on very quickly, which is great, while others need some more time, and some end up staying a little longer than the 30 days, and that's okay. Everyone is on their own journey and they move through their experiences very differently, and not all women need the same support from us. Our crisis counselors provide women with support through crisis counseling, safety planning, and referrals to resources within our own agency and referrals outside in the community. We check in daily with women and complete weekly planning to support them in their plan to move forward. So it's extremely important to us that we work from a trauma-informed lens, where we recognize that every woman's inherent right to make her own decisions. We will never pressure a woman to leave a relationship. We'll never judge her or pressure her to return to a relationship, as we want women to ultimately decide what is right for them and empower them in their decisions. In doing so, we rebuild the sense of control and empowerment, which is something that she may never have had before, and I had that experience to be in control of her own future.
So this leads us to where we are kind of current day, and about, oh goodness, almost 2 years ago now, I guess it is, we were incredibly honored that Somnos House was selected as one of 4 transition houses across BC to be a pilot site for a 5-year commitment with Cedar Blankets, which is truly a program about indigenizing our transition house services and exploring how to be more culturally safe for all individuals, in particular Indigenous females. And that commitment really expanded our passion around the subjects and our curiosity about how we could integrate it into one program, but what about all the other 13 programs currently running? And so the generosity extended by Corey, who is the lead on Cedar Blankets through the BC Transition House Services, really was remarkable, I'll say, in that she actually extended that offer to us for the program, the Cedar Blankets program, to allow our whole agency to participate. For us, this was such a pivotal moment because it meant that not only is the transition house going to be going through this absolute revolution and change, but the whole agency could go along this with them and really support one another through that. So all of our housing programs, all of our internal programs that support a lot of the clients in the housing programs would all be going through that same learning, that same change curve, and be able to grow together, to develop together, and really to be able to ultimately support one another too through the learnings that were about to take place and that we know are still going to continue to take place.
So when we began our journey with Cedar Blankets, there was a very strong curiosity from all of our staff within the agency about what this meant for, not only the agency, but also for our programs and the clients that we serve and the teams that we belong to. With that, there was also a hesitancy just around the same things that we were curious about. While we all know that change isn't easy, we do understand that it is necessary. And one question that kept coming up for ourselves and for each other was, why do we need to change? So as human beings, we appreciate comfort. And when we are comfortable in our work, we are reluctant to change the way that we work. So we started exploring this discomfort that we had, and questions led us closer to the answers that we were seeking, such as, aren't we already doing the work? Well, the answer to that is that we've started, but we still have a long way to go. More questions around, we're already inclusive and diverse, so what more do we need to do? Being inclusive and diverse isn't the answer to removing barriers to access. With that came more personal questions for ourselves as we looked in is, how will this affect me? How will this affect me in my work? How will this affect the team that I work with? I took courses. I already know all this stuff. I don't have time for this kind of training. So we soon realized that it was of the most importance that we created safe spaces so staff could have the opportunity to take that moment to really look deeper into themselves and find their own why and find their own answers as what was necessary and work through their fears while we made this necessary change.
When I first joined the agency as staff and transitioned out of the board, I had a very wise colleague share with me the 4 C's: connect, create, contribute, and choose. At the time, we were talking around staff engagement, what people needed to really feel a part of the agency. And through this journey with Cedar Blankets, it really kept kind of coming back for me, especially during change curves and during people's emotions as they really worked through their own individual fears around this change, but also the unknown future of where this was actually going to take us. I don't think any of us knew where this would lead us to. And I think there's still a lot of questions around where this is going to continue to evolve through. What's really cool is through practicing the 4 C's, we now feel really comfortable, though, that everyone's committed to whatever that evolution looks like. So when we talk about connection, it's really making sure, as Racheal indicated, that those safe spaces are created for people where they can truly connect and feel like they have an opportunity to feel a part of their team, to feel a part of the agency, to feel a part of the change and the learning, and to feel that support and relationship that ultimately creates trust. And then we move on to create. And we wanted to ensure that people had space and empowerment to also help visualize what it is that we're creating here. We didn't know what it was going to look like, but with that ability to allow creativity, to allow space for people's voices to be heard, we knew it would be spectacular. And then the contribution, really making sure that it was collaborative. At no point did we want this to be patriarchal or hierarchical. We wanted people to feel like this was something where it was a collaborative means of all of us contributing together, of all voices being able to be heard, regardless of privilege, regardless of status, regardless of power, regardless of any of those dynamics, that space was truly created for every single person to participate. And ultimately, we wanted to empower everybody to feel they had the choice. If this wasn't a journey that they were wanting to be a part of, what then was the other options? What did they see as a different solution? And working through that, ultimately, everyone did choose to participate, which was incredible. One of the things that I've added on to that, though, especially since the Cedar Blanket's in-person training, is a fifth C. And I think this is really the foundation of the 4 C's, and that's the circle. And the circle to me is so representative of so many things, but it really does ultimately create that flow of information that's never ending, and there's no barriers between the participants. Everybody's sitting in an equal spot. Everybody's able to make eye contact with one another. Everybody's able to share without barrier. And that circle, as you're going to start to hear about, really started to become the center of how we do things. We've brought that into our physical spaces. We've brought that into our diagrams, our visual diagrams of how we see the agency, of how we see communication. And so that circle is really starting to be reflected in so many various areas of who we are and how we see ourselves, which has been ultimately incredibly rewarding. The aha moment. So I would be lying if I didn't say there were so many of these moments. But what I would like to do is actually invite anyone who feels comfortable to just close your eyes for a moment and do a little visual with me. And what I'd like you to see is a big empty room. And in that room is about 30 chairs created into a circle. One by one, 30 different women representing all different programs, all different roles, all different backgrounds, walk in and they have a seat at an empty chair. Eventually, the circle's filled and there's this beautiful energy that's created, although uncertain, sitting in this massive circle of an empty room. You sit there and you're sharing and you're going as deep as you possibly can. And you do so for 3 days. You continue to walk in. You continue to have a seat in this large room at this chair. And you share in a way that you know it's safe. You can cry. You can share what you're learning. You can grow. You can grow as a group, as an individual. You can bond. And through that, you find this common purpose. A goal that you ultimately, it's so tangible, you can feel it as you're leaving that room after those 3 days. And for us, that was our reality as we worked with the Cedar Blankets team for 3 days. We walked into this room not knowing where the day would take us, knowing though that it would be emotional, knowing that we were going to be asked to go deep and to really do the reflective work necessary to carry on with this journey. And at the end of that 3 days, every single person in there left with a very clear understanding of what we needed to do in all of our hearts, our minds, and the unity that was created around that was spectacular. There were several things that really, as mentioned, stood out for us. That circular way of sitting, thinking, and talking, that's truly become the pillar of our agency. But the thing that we truly carry forward, and for me that I get emotional every time I talk about, is when we first all came in and sat at these chairs around a circle in this room, we were asked to work with the person next to us and sing with one hand each, tie these ribbons, these beautiful ribbons all together and make a large circle. And then place them down in front of us once it was all tied together. As you can imagine, this was challenging and took more time probably than we care to admit. However, at the end, it was a beautiful, large circle filled with all different colors and placed in front of us. It then really brought to attention the empty chair that had sat in the middle of this circle for the 3 days. And that chair, that's the chair that really resonated. That chair represented all the Indigenous women lost to violence that we weren't able to help through our Western constructs. That chair represented all the women not able to flee due to barriers. It represented the children not able to have a safe place to go. It represented the song of the village crying for its people. That chair, that empty chair at the center of our energy, is our purpose. It is preventing any more chairs from being placed in that circle. It's being willing to truly look at systems, at constructs, at understandings, and being willing to go deep and explore how we can do things differently, ultimately, for that one chair that sat there and what it represented.
Thank you. Yeah, that training was definitely the moment where I think a light was switched on for a lot of people, realizing what we're doing this for and why we have to make these changes. So once we completed the online modules of training for Cedar Blankets and this in-person training, we ended up spending quite a bit of time reflecting on what we as an agency, we as in teams within our own programs, envisioned and valued to move forward. We thought about who we were, what was so important to us as staff and as individuals working together, and why. Why was this so important? And that chair in the middle is always something that comes up for us. We discussed the barriers to access and how we thought that we should be able to move forward and how we could break down those barriers. Now that we had some direction, we could take some time to inquire in how we would get there. How are we going to break down these steps? Well, we wanted to create new roles within the agency that would support our vision. We knew we wanted to indigenize our spaces and foster relationships with other organizations like Cowichan tribes, for example. We also wanted to change the way we gathered information and collected feedback in our transition houses. And before we were ready to act on these things, we took some time and we were able to pause and sit with our ideas. We also learned a lot of lessons along the way. We know that we're not always going to get it right the first time, and we have to be okay with that because it means we're trying. And no decision or action is still a decision. We're remembering who we're doing this for. Again, it's the chair in the middle of that circle, and there's no assumptions in the process. We need to invite the voices that we look to empower. So now we're ready to act. And in the last year, we have accomplished so many incredible changes within our agency, within our programs, within ourselves. We've grown so much. We've broken down barriers, and we can now proudly say that we're well on our way to indigenizing a trauma-informed agency. We've hired a diversity, equity, and cultural liaison. She works internally and externally from a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens to foster relationships and create meaningful change, both on a micro and a macro level. Right now, we're in the process of hiring an elder in residence. So her role will be to support women at the transition house and act as a bridge between clients and staff, and she'll help further enhance the trusting relationships within clients who reach out to access services in the house. And eventually, we would love to be able to include an elder in residence in the entire agency. Our transition house, something that we're very proud of, is 100% Indigenous led. So this is important not only for the women accessing our services to be able to come in and see that they're being represented, their thoughts, their values, where they need to go, that's being represented when they walk into the transition house. But we're also fostering trust when we're building relationships in the community. Trust was lost, and trust needs to be earned again. So for us to be able to have this Indigenous-led program in our community means so much to the community and the people that we serve. We've also approved spending surpluses to Indigenize physical spaces. We know that women should feel comfortable and connected when they access services and be able to see their culture being represented when they walk through the doors. We have also changed our program and agency policies and procedures, including hiring practices and options for stat holidays. We have created a cultural safety survey for staff. And we are starting an Indigenous Advisory Council. So this will be a group of Indigenous women who will lead our agency along this new path. We are creating and fostering strong relationships with Cowichan tribes, including partnering on a housing project with House of Friendship. And we have changed the transition house intake process and how we collect feedback. We realized how important it was collecting feedback, how anonymous we were hoping it was in the beginning. Women were welcome to fill out a feedback form and then give it to us. But we're recognizing now that we aren't able to move forward with any changes in that feedback because it's not as anonymous as we were hoping. We will now have, women will have the opportunity to provide feedback that'll be in a shared space. They will be able to put their feedback into a box in a space in the house, knowing that it will be anonymous and they can give us their honest feedback and how they're feeling, and we will be able to make those changes. We realize now our intake processes need to change. We ask a lot of questions on intake, and we now know that if we get the important questions at the beginning, we can then take some time to sit with the women who come into our house, the Indigenous women who need to build the trust with us before they give us these answers. And we're going to have coffee with them. We sit and have tea with them and let the information come out naturally over their stay with us. We've also changed our views on traditional barriers to women and children in the house in relation to family reunification. We understand that some Indigenous families are larger than, a typical family, and it's not uncommon for grandmothers or aunts to be raising their nieces, their nephews, and grandchildren. So we have made changes in our internal policies and practices to allow for family reunification in our transition house. Before we might say the room isn't big enough, or we don't have the room to have that many people. But now we will wheel a cot in. We'll make sure that we are reunification for this family is top priority.
So to add to some of our lessons learned, our big takeaways, we want to say everybody's at their own stage in their path, and we have to honor where they're at. We also as a team need to recognize where we're at, and if we see someone struggling, if we see somebody needing that conversation, that safety, that space, to go and sit with them, to be really aware not just of how we're feeling, but having that empathy and that awareness of others as well. Again, just knowing that you're not going to get it right the first time always, and really being able to accept that. Being gentle with yourself. We use the word grace a lot, and I think it truly encompasses what we all are asking of one another as we work through this. There's 70 of us, so there's going to be a percentage of times almost daily where we're getting something wrong. And so what you'll often hear, I'm not sure if this is right, so I'm asking for some grace as I kind of talk my way through this. But really being gentle and just knowing that it means ultimately that we're trying. Again, just that no decision or action, it still is a decision. You're choosing to stay static. And so just being very aware that you're still consciously making a choice, even if that choice is to not change. And remember who you're doing this for. For us, that is the biggest one. Really, really, that chair in the middle just it guides us so deeply. It's like a hand just kind of gently steering us along as we walk this path of knowing that we are committed and walking through something we don't ultimately know where we're heading to. And making sure there's no assumptions in that process, really gathering the feedback, gathering the voices, as Racheal said, so that we're not making our own Western assumptions as we work through this, that we're ultimately asking the people we're doing this for what is needed to truly indigenize the space and make it safe. So to do this, to indigenize a trauma-informed agency, we would say if you don't have the commitment of the time to learn as a team, it likely won't be successful, particularly in large teams. And if you're not willing to be bold and to truly be courageous, to trailblaze and to stumble and to really put yourselves out there and take risks and just leap, then it might not be the right thing. But if you are, it's the most rewarding thing. And I'll just visit this one quote because it's in my office. Actually, it's been there the last couple of years. And I'm really honored. I'm very privileged in my role to get to be able to lead employee-centric policies and procedures for the agency and to create really positive change. And the thing that always sits with me that I try really hard to keep as my center vision when I'm looking at things like that is to remind myself it's not inclusion if you invite people into a space that you're unwilling to change. And that for me really resonates. It's not just a quick change of a policy and I'll revisit it in 5 years. It's am I willing to look at this all the time? Am I willing to continue to change things? Am I willing to gather feedback regularly and make sure that that feedback is then feeding into the changes being created? And really commit myself that this is an ongoing circle, that this never has a conclusion, but that change has to occur if we want to be a truly inclusive agency.
And I think too, I just want to add for lessons learned is we always need to be curious. Mm-hmm. And we've learned to slow things down and question why. Why are we doing this? Because we never want to lose that vision of why we're doing this.
Absolutely. One of the things the House does brilliantly that we've actually fostered into other programs as well, it's a training provided through Roy Leadership Group, who's incredible. And it's taking time to reflect, to do that inquiry, to be truly curious, giving a little space for a pause, just really taking stock of what you've reflected on, what you've learned, and then going into action so that we're never rushing something. We're always being thoughtful in our approach. We've made sure that we've done it with care and with the intentions that are going to reflect in the outcomes. And it's truly made a large difference in how we work, to give ourselves permission to go deep into that why, to give ourselves permission to slow down and really not feel like every single thing is urgent and needs to be done today. Sometimes it does, please don't get me wrong, but not every time.
So the path's still ahead. I feel like we've accomplished so much and I'm very proud of us as an agency. But if we're looking ahead at the future, visions of connection, relationship, and respect frame Indigenized spaces where cultural safety and practices are so embedded into who we are that they are a natural state and expectation. We will have strong and collaborative relationships with our Indigenous community partners, and we'll foster respect and honor their truths while working towards reconciliation. We'll continue working from a trauma-informed foundation, recognizing the large role cultural awareness influences our thoughts, paths, and ways of doing and being.
And that is our presentation.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much. And kudos to you. Change was never easy. And this isn't a minor change. This is a major thing involving a lot of people. And it sounds like you've figured out how to do it. And so I think a lot of people will love this session. I know it's already making me kind of think about, how we can do change better where we are. So thank you very much for this incredible presentation and for showing us more about your agency and what you do.
Thank you for inviting us to share and giving us the space to do so.
Oh, it's fantastic. So we have a few minutes for Q&A. So if anyone would like to ask a question to our speakers, there is just in the blue bar below the video screen, there's a Q&A icon there that you would have to click on and just type your question in there. I have a question here. I have a couple questions. First of all, how did you get all staff to buy into your vision of change and what the change would look like and the work involved with creating that change?
I won't speak specifically for the transition house, but when we're looking at the whole agency, I don't want to make it sound easy because it wouldn't be truthful. It's hard. And I say it's hard not because of a lack of willingness always. A lot of the time it truly comes down to capacity and timing and what's happening in the agency. And so it was ironic that we were really committing ourselves to this during a time that we'd also truly committed ourselves to kind of stabilizing and trying to pause on the growth for a moment while we got our feet under us on some new initiatives we'd done. And so there was definitely going back to a why, and we didn't have that empty chair at the circle to really evoke the emotional entanglement at the time to truly get people motivated and bought in. And so it was a lot of reminding, a lot of checking in, a lot of bringing back to the forefront. We're passionate about this as an agency. We have been on this journey prior to Cedar Blankets of really committing ourselves to social justice, to equity initiatives. And so this is our next step. But I think the moment it actually clicked, where people truly bought in, where there was no more needing to go and remind people and I don't want to say chase down, but a little bit of chasing down people to ensure like the online courses were done and things like that, was when we were all together in that room. The power fostered of 30 people sitting in a room where they truly felt safe and were sharing and connecting in that deep of a manner.
Wow.
It kind of sparked its own energy. It created its own life. And that is when people no longer needed to be reaching for a motivation or reaching for someone to remind them. It's where they truly, I saw them just leap themselves into that and take their own initiative of really wanting to ensure that this work not only started that day, but that it really continued and took on a life of its own.
And I'll just echo that, like for how it was at the transition house before that in-person training, when that was the moment it clicked. Prior to that, how, we kept staff engaged at the transition house was we kept the conversation going. We would talk about personal reflections and land acknowledgements at every staff meeting. We had a binder sitting in our staff room on the table where people can add different things that they found. They read a news article that was really impactful to them and they would add it to the binder. They would, anything and everything was welcome in this binder to keep the conversation going for Indigenous issues, exciting things happening in the Indigenous world. Like, we just kept the conversation going. And then it was that in-person training where it just fully clicked. And it wasn't reminding to keep the conversation going after that. Everybody just wanted to talk about it and their experiences, which was really exciting.
Wow. I guess that really speaks to the power and influence of a physical interactive exercise, like you said, your training, but it was more than training, and sitting in that circle and just doing the interactive things kind of just really integrates it into your I guess your emotions, your mind and your memory, and so that really helps that why stick. And it just makes me think even I guess even the smallest change within an organization needs a why. And I suppose it's starting to get me think about the importance of internal marketing sometimes. Not everything, requires all staff interaction for small things, but for something important as this, I can see how powerful it was. And I'm sure a lot of our attendees in this session are probably thinking of how this is a great way. It's a great way to get board members to buy in too. For some reason, boards are on my mind today. We have a great board, but I mean, really for them to kind of understand and get, it's to get them involved in interactive activities like this, just to keep it in the forefront of all our decisions. That's so powerful. Here's another one. How did you support staff through these agency-wide changes?
Well, there was a lot of support, and in a lot of different ways. There was support through the diversity, equity, and cultural liaison. A lot of people reached out to her and spoke to her or felt like they could ask her questions. There was a lot of support through our supervisory team, just really taking that time one-on-one with every person, doing those touch bases. We supported people through resources too. You talk a lot about internal messaging. We have an internal newsletter that we put out, and so we ensured there was material through there, but we also talked about who to reach out to if you wanted more information. And then I think the one thing that sticks out for me in terms of support was one of the online courses was incredibly heavy. Mm-hmm. It was very triggering. There was a lot of information in it, a lot of learning around the background of what Indigenous individuals experienced, a lot of individual stories to hear and listen to. And so making sure that we recognize it and didn't try to just, okay, you're done the training, now we're ready for this, that we didn't treat it as like a simple webinar, that we really took the time as an agency to recognize that it's emotionally triggering, that people might need time after. We even talked to them about the best times to take it. When do you, like if you're feeling emotionally triggered, do you want time at home? Like maybe you want to do it from home that day. Do you want it at work because you're working with Susie over here and Susie's a great support for you? But being really conscious that that we were aware that we recognized the triggers that we're holding within these conversations, within these learnings, within these within the supports even that we offer. So it doesn't have to be somebody in the agency. We have EFAP to reach out to because perhaps it's triggered something that you want to just speak to a counselor about in confidentiality. So we tried really hard to ensure we had supports both internally, externally, always confidentially, and always safe.
Mm-hmm. And I know for us in the transition house too, I really checked in a lot with staff, knowing where they were in their training piece for the online modules. I was checking in a lot, like, where are you with that? Do you want to talk about it? I'm here to talk about it. We also offered clinical supervision at the transition house to support staff moving through their training and, where they would have questions or triggers. And we actually did it twice. We had 2 clinical supervisions based on our training with Cedar Blankets.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that. That's something we've actually now offered for the whole agency as well. So that is a really critical piece within the agency. We're huge proponents of the benefits of clinical supervision.
Yeah, that's wisdom. That's wisdom. I guess I can assume that obviously, or maybe not obvious, that among all that staff, some people were quick to embrace the change and others were very resistant and everything in between. Did you find that maybe there were key staff members that are more influential among staff that needed to be won over so that others would, or did it have nothing to do with that? Because I find sometimes in a work culture, there are certain personalities that are very resistant and there are more leader types and follower types. Or did any of that play into this transition integration at all? Or did my question make sense?
At first, and like who we selected to be the Cedar Blankets leads. And then what quickly became apparent to me in the room with the individuals was it didn't matter at all. Everybody was just in their own space. And what really mattered was everybody being aware of where they were feeling about the change, and then really being aware of how the room was feeling and how maybe their people close to them were feeling too. So it's like I said, if they see someone that's still in that early stage on the change curve, they're feeling really resistant or really unsure or scared or angry, and they're already up at acceptance. Not to get frustrated that person's not getting it as fast as them, but to actually reflect, what did I do? Why am I feeling so accepting of this? And go and sit with that person and just be with them and give them what they need in that moment to help them through. So it really created a supportive atmosphere. And it actually had not as much to do with leadership traits or personality traits, more just, again, some people were already so far on this path. People are just stepping into this path about learning and about, like I heard several times, like, I had no idea this happened. I had no idea about the 60 scoop. I had no idea. So they're just dipping their toes in. And some people are so far on that learning, or that is their reality. They've lived through this. And so it's that lived experience. And so it's giving one another understanding of everybody's on that own path and working together to help support one another through that.
Wow. So the word grace, the word grace